we have to understand constructor. What is a constructor? What is a this keyword? What is a super keyword? And what is the chaining and overloading? We can overload constructor also. So constructor, we can say it helps us to initialize the member variables of a class. So when you create a new instance of a class using new keyword, a constructor for that class is called. Like as just now we have done student s1 equal to new student, something like that, right? So constructors are used to initialize the instance variable. Important notes about constructor. The constructor name must match the name of the class. So when you are writing constructor, the constructor name should match with the class name, and constructor must not have a return type. It is illegal to have a method with the same name as the class, but that does not make it constructor. We can make a method with the same name. We can have a return type, but the behavior is not like a constructor. If you see a return type, it's method rather than a constructor. So once you are giving return type, it will become method. In fact, you could have both a method and a constructor with the same name, the name of the class in the same class, and that's not a problem for Java. Be careful not to mistake a method for a constructor, and be sure look for a return type. If you don't type a constructor into your class code, a default constructor will be automatically generated by compiler, but only if you have not put any argument constructor in the class. So every class is having one default constructor. Once if you are making an argument constructor, you have to make it. The default constructor is always a no argument constructor. If user puts a no argument constructor, then that becomes the default constructor, and compiler does not supply any default constructor. So if you have not created, okay, compiler will give you. If you want a no argument constructor and you have a type any other constructor into your class code, the compiler won't provide the no argument constructor for you. In other words, if you have a type in a constructor with arguments, you won't have a no argument constructor unless you type it in yourself. So if you are having no argument or argument based constructor, you have to make a default constructor. Okay, so next some more stuff with the constructor. Every constructor has its first statement a call to the superclass constructor super method. So if you say super bracket, it will call first superclass constructor. This call can be inserted by compiler if user does not put it explicitly. Compiler inserted call to super is always non-argument, but user can put either argument or non-argument super call. So always compiler doing. If you are doing, it's fine. Only static variables and methods can be accessed as a part of the call to super or this. Example super animal.name. So is okay because name is a declared static variable. So in the super, if you want to pass, it should be static variables. Okay. Abstract class have constructor, and those constructors are always called when concrete subclass is instantiated. So if you're making abstract class, okay, there's a constructor, but that will get only for subclass. Interfaces do not have constructor. Interfaces are not a part of objects inheritance tree. Constructors are not inherited in Java. A constructor cannot be abstract, static, final, native, or synchronized. All these kinds is not possible. The throws clause for a constructor is identical in the structure and behavior to the throws clause for a method. So we can have some throws and all. A return statement may be used in the body of a constructor if it does not include an expression. Okay. So an explicit constructor invocation statement in the constructor body may not refer to any instance variables or instance methods declared in this class or any superclass, or use this or super in any expression, otherwise a compile time error will come. So next, that is this and super. So this calls another constructor in the same class. So if you want to call from one constructor to another class in the same class, we can use this, and super is for the super class constructor. So whenever, let us say I have one class and I want to call the super class constructor, so we need to use super here. We can pass some argument, and if we are not passing argument, it will call the default constructor of super class or default constructor of the same class. Okay, look at this example of this. What here we have done, public class point, there's a two variable m underscore x, m underscore y, and then public point. So if you can look this here, we are having one constructor, argument based constructor. There is no return type here, right? And this name is matching with the class name here. What were the class name here? We are having same. Now what about this public point here? So again the another constructor having the same name, but there is no argument. And what we are doing here, we are calling this. What this guy will do? It will call this constructor here at this place with 0 0 argument. So x will go 0 and y will go 0. So this variable will initialize with 0 and 0. So you understood how to declare a default constructor, how to declare an argument based constructor, and how to call this. Next is the super. So how we can call the super class constructor? Again the same code here, but here we are writing super. Okay. What will happen if I create object and I say no argument, then this will call, and this guy will call this guy, right? And this super will call the super class constructor. What is the super class constructor here? Every class is a subclass of object. So every class is extending by default what class? Object class. Okay. So object is a super class for all class. Now it is calling the object class constructor here. We can do with our class also. Next is the chaining and overloading. Every constructor calls its superclass constructor, and implied super is therefore included in each constructor, which does not include either the this function or an explicit super calls at its first statement. The super statement invokes a constructor of the superclass. Okay, as we have seen in the code. So the implicit super can be replaced by an explicit super parenthesis. The super statement must be the first statement of the constructor. You must remember this. It should be first line. The explicit super allows parameter values to be passed to the constructor of its superclass and must have matching parameter type. So whenever you are calling superclass constructor, in the super you have to pass that argument, then it will call the argument based constructor. If you're not passing any value, then it is a non-argument based constructor will call, I mean default constructor will call. So here if you look at here, the constructor of the subclass will result in the call of the relevant constructor from the superclass based on the signature of the call. So this is called constructor chaining. So as per my argument passing, as per if I am passing, if I am passing default just super, it is calling automatically default constructor of the superclass. So we can say this is the constructor chaining. And next below is example of demonstrating constructor chaining using super. So if you can look this code here, there's a class cube having some get volume method, right? And then there's a one constructor, cube constructor, and cube is passing argument here, this. So in the cube we are passing this 1010, so it will call the same class constructor, and from here it will go to the second constructor which we are having here. So I can say here, this is my code, and this will called here, right? So once we create object of cube class, it is calling this. In turn, it is calling this constructor here. And what will happen in the next? Now this cube is again calling. Look at here. This three argument, right? So in turn, this constructor is again calling this guy with three arguments, right? So here I have a three arguments, and if you can see the below code here, what we are having, another class is there, spatial cube, extend cube here, and in the extend cube, so cube is the superclass here, and spatial cube is the subclass. So this is my subclass now, and what we are doing here, we are creating a constructor, and here we are saying super. So this line means what? It will go to the superclass and call the default constructor of cube. Another constructor I have, again we are saying here this guy will call here, right? Because it is the same class constructor. And if you notice here, this is always we are writing in the first line. Here we are always writing in the first line, right? Now if I create object of a special cube with this parameter, so it is calling the same class constructor, so it is coming here, and this guy is calling this super, means it will go to here, it will call to the super class constructor. Okay, so this is what constructor chaining we are having, right? And if you can look the more code here, so we are having one main method, we are creating object of a special cube. So there are two objects created here. First of all, so first object with no argument, second object with two arguments. So in turn it will call to the one constructor of the special queue. A special queue in turn call the superclass constructor, and then we are calling some methods of that class. I hope you understood the constructor chaining and overloading of constructors, right? Overloading, just come once again here. So if you can look this special cube, how many constructor we are having here? We are having three constructor, right? One is the default constructor, second two argument, third three arguments. So what is this? This is constructor overloading. Clear?